Mhm.
Thank you very much.
Nice to see everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming. My name is Mike Klein, and I am the founder of We Lead Comms, which has been organizing this series of debates between communication leaders from around the world. You have arrived at debate number 3, the future of communications resourcing. And before I turn the baton over to our moderator, Anne-Marie Blake, I just wanted to thank the Center for Strategic Communication Excellence for their continuing sponsorship of the We Lead Comms debates. And just to give you an idea of what we're going to do, basically it's a debate. Anne-Marie is going to moderate. She will introduce the guests will debate. And at the end, I'll sum things up and invite you to the next debate, which will be coming up in early August. And so on that note, let me hand the baton over to Anne-Marie Blake.
Thank you so much, Mike, and thank you for inviting me. So I can see some familiar names in the participants list. So I know that many of you know me, but without making this 40 minutes of my own CV, just a kind of little bit about me. I wear several hats. So I'm co-founder of an agency called True. I'm also a serial volunteer, so that's where I know Mike from the IABC, and I also have the honour of being a We Lead Comms honoree. So thank you very much. It's fantastic to be here. It's my pleasure to moderate today. Before we kind of start the session, I think it'd be good to understand a bit about kind of my fellow panelists. So I'm going to ask you in 2 breaths, if that's okay, because otherwise it does become a bit long in terms of who we are. In 2 breaths, just to talk a bit about who you are and what your particular interest is in this topic. And I'm going to come to you first, Max, and then I'm going to go to Jane.
Sure. Well, thank you very much, Anne-Marie. I will try and keep this to as close to 2 breaths as possible. So my name is Max Forsyth. I am the MD and founder of Comms Search and Selection. So we are a specialist comms recruitment agency based in the UK, but we cover the UK and the US markets. And very quickly, what am I looking forward to most in this debate? Oh, probably the question around AI and what that holds for communications resourcing.
Oh, I might not ask the question now. Okay, Max. Thank you, Jane. Would you say a couple of things about yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Jane Randel. Like Emery, I wear, I don't know, 50 hats or so. I am the co-founder of Corp Randel, which is a social impact agency. I came out of corporate communications in the fashion world for 20 years, and then went into social impact, and also started Comms Collective with 4 other partners, which is a organization that places fractional communications people in roles. So that's why I'm here.
Brilliant. Thank you and welcome, Jane. Travis.
Hi there, Travis Parman. I am the Chief Communications Officer for Philip Morris International in the US. Most of my background is automotive with Nissan, Renault, and General Motors. And prior to Philip Morris, I was working on a sustainable farming startup in Eastern Kentucky, providing good jobs for some of the most economically devastated areas in the US.
Fantastic. And welcome to Travis. And that's the wonderful thing about this profession. We come from all sorts of areas and have done all sorts of interesting things before. So look, let me kick off with the first question. This is about the future of comms resourcing. What are some of the trends that we're seeing around the comms resourcing space? So who shall I go to first? Maybe I'll go to you, Max, actually, as you spend a lot of your day doing this.
Yeah, sure. So recruitment and comms recruitment, they are often a pretty good bellwether of what the broader economy is doing. So just a quick update on where we are. I think kind of this time last year was pretty difficult for everybody. Things are getting a bit better. It's by no means, a normal level of vacancies and a normal job market. But I think, we've all seen, friends, colleagues and peers on our LinkedIn feeds who have started to get snapped up recently. So I certainly think, kind of the market is definitely bottomed out, and it should be onwards and upwards from here. Certainly looking at the macroeconomic picture with, kind of interest rates have probably peaked around the world, and businesses have a bit more confidence in terms of their budgeting and their plans for hiring. still waiting for the uptick in contract and interim roles to come through. I'm still noticing a lot of comms interim and contractors are all looking for new roles still at the moment. So hopefully that will pick up, but when, I'm not quite sure.
Well, hopefully it's soon, Max. I mean, I'm in a WhatsApp group with about 600 various communicators across the world at various levels. And the jobs bit of it is very busy, and it's quite kind of heart-wrenching sometimes just to hear how long some people have been on the bench and looking, and it must be a little bit soul-destroying. So let's hope it does pick up soon. Jane, what's your perspective?
So I am going to say for just a little bit about Comms Collective for 4 seconds, not minutes. There are 5 partners. 4 of us are former CCOs at public companies, and one of us, I like to call her the ringer, Lisa Ryan, has been in the recruiting business for her entire career. Travis, you're nodding, you know Lisa.
Yeah, I know Lisa. I've not heard the name in a minute, so that's fantastic to know where to find her.
Yes, you know where to find her. So she retired from Haven Associates, where she worked for many years, and we snapped her up. And so I like to say she's our ringer because she's been doing this for a really long time. And what she is seeing, because I will quote her because this is what she does, that people really want more generalists, that all skills are important, and writing and leadership are sort of number one. So that's what she's seeing in the world that she works in now.
Fantastic. And are you seeing any kind of differences with agency versus in-house or not, or have you not really noticed that?
That's not really where we play, so I'm not sure I can really answer that. I mean, look, we all read, so we've seen a lot of agencies shed people. We've seen a lot of churn in the industry. I think it just it depends on what's happening. There's a huge merger going on in the US with Burson, H&K, and so there's a lot happening in the space.
Thank you, Jane. Travis, what about you? What are you noticing in terms of some of the trends?
So I've been staffing up. We're ramping up Philip Morris International in the US right now. So I've had my tentacles into this. I really like what Jane was saying about looking for generalists, emphasizing writing skills and leadership ability. And I presume that's both leading a function as well as being able to interact and having the sufficient gravitas to really counsel senior leaders too, to help them with their platforms. And that's what I'm looking for. In fact, I wrote into one of my job descriptions that I'm looking for a Swiss Army knife. I need someone who's a good generalist who can go to wherever the trouble is and help with it and then jump to something else very quickly because they've got that deep level of knowledge of the organization. So yeah, I find that very interesting.
Brilliant, thank you. And I like that phrase, Swiss Army knife. And in fact, I was reading something the other day that said communications professionals are being expected to advise more on non-comms or traditionally non-comms subjects and having a broader understanding of what's going in the world. So, it's a bit of a call to action to us all, isn't it, to upskill and kind of make ourselves aware. Sorry, just a reminder to everyone else that's listening on the webinar, if you do have any questions, do pop them in the Q&A and I will come to them. Now, interesting question. Well, I think it's an interesting question. I wrote it. Fractional. Now, this is a phrase that I must admit, after 12 years as an interim, has kind of caught me a little bit by surprise. It's not one that I'd heard previously. So, what do we mean by fractional, and is the future fractional? So I don't know who wants to take that first. Maybe I'll look to Max really just to ask. Jane,
sure.
Jane. I'll go to Jane. Jane.
Yeah.
Jane.
Sure.
Jane, you go first.
Thank you. Fractional, it is an interesting thing. We have a whole piece on our website, in fact, that what is the difference between a consultant and a fractional or interim? You can really use that somewhat interchangeably. The fractional concept really was started, I believe, with CFOs, CMOs, they're fractional CMOs, CTOs, even CEOs for startups. But we really see the difference in a fractional versus a consultant it's just that you're in there, you're part of the team. In fact, Travis, as you're talking, I know you hate it, but as you're talking, that's the kind of person you're looking at, right? What we have in our talent pool are senior people who are maybe they're between a gig, maybe they're done with the full-time gig and they want to do something else. But I know when I switched from being a consultant, from being in-house to a consultant, one of the hardest things for me was I sit and I talk to my clients, they get very engaged, and then they go and have meetings and they don't include me. Like I'm not part of it. And it was like a weird transition for me. But if I'm fractional, if I'm interim, I'm at the table and I have the abilities to counsel senior leadership. And I am, enough of a generalist, because really good comms people are generalists, to learn the industry and move in and flow in and out of an organization. So I think, with uncertain and the benefit with uncertainty, fractional becomes more appealing because you have the flexibility of not having a full-time hire. You have the expertise that you need, the seasoned expertise that you need, and you have the really the access to specialized talent and cost efficiency. So it's really a win-win-win from where we sit.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Look, so I know we build this as a debate, don't we? Or a discussion where we disagree agreeably, excuse me. And Travis, I'm going to ask you to come off the fence and tell us what you think about fraction. Because I know you do have some views on it.
I agree with things Jane said. I think the problem comes with the organizations not really knowing how to leverage fractional in the right way. So I think that with the communications function, to your point earlier, Anne Marie, the business is asking communications folks to comment, to give advice on issues that have not been traditionally comms related. I think that's fantastic because it's communications that really works more cross-functionally than any other function outside of maybe HR. And they're in a great position to be able to knock down those silos and to really force some issues on, hey, let's make a decision on this. This is something that's facing us and we need these 5 functions to weigh in on it, and they can really force it to happen. I think that's incredibly difficult to do from a fractional perspective. Now, can fractional work? Yes, I absolutely think it can at the most senior level, where you need somebody who can really provide a good counsel, good strategic direction, and you've got somebody on the team that they can go to on a regular basis that can really execute. But in my experience, folks like that person who's in-house on a regular basis that they can turn to, that they can see. And I know we're going increasingly virtual. It's the first question I get on, everybody who applies for a job is, can I do this virtually?
I'm going to come back to that, but go on.
But those senior folks really like to have somebody they can turn to on a regular basis. My concern is that most organizations are not structured well enough to have the discipline to leverage a fractional leader in the right way. And there are so many communications that pop up on a regular basis that are very nuanced, that if you're not immersed regularly in the business, it can be difficult to catch up and really provide a lot of that direction on a consistent basis. So can it be done? Absolutely. Do most organizations have the discipline to do it right? Absolutely not.
I think it also depends if you're looking to put in, sorry, Max, one just quick thing. If you're looking to do the CCO role, or if you're looking at other roles. In other words, if you have mat leave or family leave, right, and you need someone to come in and keep the wheels on the bus and, manage people and interact with senior leadership, fractional, is a great way to do it. You have a seasoned person who knows how to do that. And you don't have to have them there for 40 hours a week, right? Or whatever, we work 40 hours a week, but you know what I mean? You may have them there, 20 hours a week, just to sort of manage stuff. I mean, that's one example. You may want to stand up your internal communications group. So you have someone come in, hire, help you put it together, and then they're out. So I think I hear what you're saying. I mean, look, again, I was CEO, you're CEO. That is a tough, if in a structured company like Philip Morris or Liz Claiborne, where I was, that's a tough thing. In startup world, it's really different. So I think it really depends on where you're looking to fill the role. Sorry, Max.
Yeah, no problem.
So Max, before you come on to that, Max, someone in the chat has actually asked for a bit more clarity in terms of the difference between fractional and interim. And I know that's the question that I asked you when
I was just going to answer that as well.
Yeah, so it'd be good if you could answer that. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, sure. So I think, kind of there's a clear distinction here between, someone who's fractional, who in effect acts as like a part-time consultant. Really, that's what it means. Versus interim, where, you know, kind of you go into somewhere full-time for 3, 6, 9, 12 months to cover a maternity leave or to cover a certain project, for example. So when people talk about fractional, that's generally what they mean is, you know, kind of they are effectively loaning themselves out to a company for a day or two a week in order, you know, kind of to give that comms expertise. I think I'm, you know, yes, whilst I can definitely see its value to an extent, startup world, Jane, I think, yeah, you're right. Although I'm definitely with Travis. I think, you know, kind of when you get to more established businesses and firms, just the nature of comms as a job itself, it's really difficult to be able to say, oh, you know, let's do everything on Monday and Tuesdays, or, you know, kind of Monday, Tuesday, Wednesdays, when, you know, something can pop up on a Thursday. Or, of course, as we all know in this industry, Friday afternoons are a great time to get a call from a journalist at a newspaper with a story they're going to break on Sunday, right? So, you know, it's difficult to do that as a fractional, you know, sort of CCO or senior comms person, I think.
I just think you all are looking at it in a really structured way. In other words, you're saying, I mean, I think, you know, the first thing we do is understand what the scope is. And so that person could be there for, you know, the equivalent of 5 days a week. Or if it's 30 hours a week, maybe they're, you know, there for X period of hours. There's no comms person I know that's going to say, oh, I'm sorry, it's 4 o'clock and I'm done. You know, that's just not how we're wired. I don't care how you're working. So I think that it means we have to broaden a little bit, or a lot of it, how you're thinking about it. You know, I think that interim and fractional are somewhat interchangeable. They're not exactly the same, because if you're interim, I agree with you, you're probably there full time till whatever. Fractional, you could have several fractional assignments at the same time. It really just depends on what the assignment is. If it's a very specific project with a very specific expertise, you know, that can work. But I just want to broaden it away from just thinking it's someone, you know, Travis acting in a fractional role. I think you have to broaden that a bit.
And do we think there's anything in particular driving the rise in fractional roles? I know we kind of say a lot, don't we? The future of work is changing, but, you know, I just wondered whether there's anything in particular kind of driving this new way of working.
Cost and money.
Cost of money, all right.
Really are the primary reasons, I think.
And people wanting flexibility, you know, and people wanting a different way of working. You know, there's more of the sort of gig economy approach, the remote working environment. You know, I think maybe we can't all agree, but I think remote working is very tough for younger executives, right? They don't have the ability, they don't have the experience of interacting in person in that sort of environment. But for a more senior person who does understand how companies work and how to interact, it's a bit easier fit, you know. So I think some of that is also work-life balance issues.
Yeah, brilliant. And I'm glad you mentioned that. And Travis, I didn't want to lose the point you made about what candidates are constantly asking you, which is whether they can do the work virtually, or whether, you know, they're going to have to bring themselves into what we know as an office. Like, what are you saying to them? What are you saying to them?
That we're essentially like a startup in a mature company, because we're ramping up the US where we haven't had business before. And so, and what I did previously, what the sustainable farming company was a tech startup. And so I had come during COVID from Nissan, and at Nissan during COVID, we had mature processes. We had people who had been in their positions long term. COVID was great for us in being able to connect. We started with a team meeting with everyone in the morning, ended with the senior leadership team in the evening, and we were better in contact, more efficient than we ever had been. But moving to that startup mode where you're establishing new relationships, establishing new processes, that's really difficult to do remotely. So we're in a mode where we are minimum 2 days in the office, trending toward what I like to see as more like 3, and our comms team to really have the cohesion that they need. You know, I'm in every day that I'm not traveling. So at least up front, until you have those established relationships and processes, I think the in-face is more important. So So yeah, but I mean, I've had, you know, a number of candidates say that I can be in the office max 1 day a week, max. And so I'm just like, okay, that's a deal breaker here.
Right.
Not for you.
Mm.
Okay, so I mean, Max, obviously you're
Yeah.
people day in, day out. Is this becoming a deal breaker, do you think, for some candidates and actually hiring managers?
I think it's odd. There is a split here between the more experienced candidates and dare I say it, Gen Z. I think the more experienced candidates actually, you know, here particularly, and even in New York, etc., seem to be absolutely fine with, you know, sort of 2 to 3 days a week in the office. That's not a problem. Junior candidates seem to either just want remote, maybe come into the office once or twice a month, and there is a clash of what businesses want, what hiring managers want, what the business needs, and what particularly more junior candidates are looking for. I don't have an answer to it. I think someone is going to win, and ultimately, you know, kind of who pays the bills? It's the company that pays the salary. So I think that will end up winning.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you how you manage that if that's a candidate you're putting forward, unless you put forward more senior people generally.
Typically, yeah, we tend to put more senior, you know, roles for, but you know, for slightly more junior roles, it's just being upfront with them at the start. And anyone that's not okay with that, you know, we just have to turn around and say, sorry, look, you know, kind of this is what the client wants and this is what they're asking for. You know, thankfully, we haven't had many briefs where, you know, it's 5 days a week in the office. That would be incredibly hard to find junior candidates for, but, you know, pretty much everyone is hybrid, and, you know, you just have to weed out and sift out the ones that aren't willing to do that.
Right.
Now, one thing I have found interesting, I'd love to hear other perspectives on it, is I have taught on the side before. And when I've taught on the side, I've done that in a hybrid fashion, only going on campus, you know, maybe 2 or 3 times a semester and teaching virtually. When I've done that, I expected, oh, this younger generation it's going to be fantastic because they're gonna ping me by text, by email. They're gonna, you know, drop in video chat me. No, they were way more often going to whoever my proctor was, who was on site to ask questions that the proctor had zero knowledge of, than to reach out to me digitally. So even though they say they want, you know, the virtual experience, they don't take advantage of it or have good communications habits doing it.
That last part is the key, right?
Yeah, I'm very glad I'm moderating this and can't have a point of view other than to say 80% of the global workforce don't have the luxury of deciding whether they want to go into an office or kind of be on the front line. So I should just leave it there. I have a question in the chat. I'm trying to follow the chat and the Q&A about pricing for fractional. So just briefly, kind of just talking about fractional in terms of how that works. Is it hours or value? You know, someone with 30 years experience, are they pricing at the same as someone else? Just want to know what you were seeing or what you would suggest.
Well, I mean, we look at scope. I mean, we look at what the project is. It's basically a project fee. It's the way I would price my own work. So it really just depends on what's needed and what skills they're bringing, et cetera, and what's within the client's budget. Because again, this is, you know, to Travis's point, to Max's point, it's budgetarily driven. Whether it's their sole client, whether it's going to be, you know, a piece of what they're doing. So there's lots of things. It's hard to say how to I mean, you know, it would be like I have a hard time pricing my own work sometimes in the social impact space. So it's, you know, there's always that fear. I don't want to price myself out and I don't want to undervalue myself. So where do I go? So it's, I don't have a magic number. Maybe Max does.
No, I think, you know, kind of that's an interesting way of looking at it. Actually, I hadn't necessarily actually thought about, you know, fractional being done on that, you know, sort of project fee basis. My mind immediately was just thinking, well, you know, kind of whether you go down an hourly rate or a daily rate or whatever, and then you know, and then you charge by the hour. So no, so actually, yeah, that project fee is a really good idea. I think, you know, particularly if you're being brought in, you know, kind of maybe there's a startup or a private equity firm who just wants some advice on what their comm strategy should be. Sure, you know, kind of why not think about pricing that up? Rates, I think for everybody, look, you know, yes, there is a little bit of cost pressure kind of downwards. But, what I would say to everybody is this, we all know how much the big four consultancy firms charge out their people at. Independent contractors could get away with charging a fair bit more, and they would still be a lot cheaper. So just bear that in mind when it comes to setting your own rates.
Certainly, when I moved from in-house to interim, I got very comfortable talking about money after then, because you talk to your peers about roughly how much you should be charging, whereas where I was in-house in financial services, you were not allowed to talk about money. And it does kind of focus the mind a little bit, doesn't it, when you need to think about how you're going to price your time.
And before we move on, Jane, something you said earlier caught my attention on that you don't know any communicator who finishes at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock on a Friday. If I can pay a fractional salary and get full-time work, that sounds pretty good to me. That gets my attention, which brings up the question, to what extent do these positions get abused and people milk them for more than they should based on what they're paying?
Right. Well, I mean, the same is true with the consultant, truthfully. It's the same way you work with an agency or anything else. We have a clause that we reevaluate in a period of time. So, the relationship is with us. We're the ones that work with the client on price, et cetera, et cetera. And then we also manage the fractional, right? And so if they have an issue, they need to come to us. So I think it's the same. I was joking, and you know exactly what I mean. I mean, I still jump into it, right? And I'm not even really doing comms the same way. You're just sort of bred like that. So.
Agreed.
I think.
Go. Sorry, Max. Go on.
No, and I was going to add to that. I think, kind of even for full-time salaried people, I think, definitely there has been a change in the industry, certainly post-COVID. And, I think Mondays and Fridays, I think if companies looked at productivity levels on those 2 days versus Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I suspect there'd be some interesting results. That's definitely a bit of a trend, but I almost think everybody seems to be relatively okay with it, and even hiring managers, probably because they're doing the same thing.
The one caveat I want to make, though, is that, I'm a dinosaur, right? The people that you're talking about that are coming up and want more work-life balance and want to end their day at a particular time. I mean, there's going to be a shift in how things are working. We're the ones that got up at 4 a.m. to go check the print Wall Street Journal or whatever. It's because you had to make sure what was happening and it's just a really different mentality. And I think that, and maybe Travis, you're seeing it more, in what you're doing as you're working with people who are younger. They have different, and you said it yourself, Max, they sort of have different parameters of what they want and will accept than I did, and I'll dare say we did. So I think that's something also to, sort of think about. It would be nice to be able to just, sign off at 4 or 5 and be done. Doesn't usually work that way, and the whole world doesn't work that way. So I think there's going to be some sort of shift happen, some happy medium coming in there somewhere at some point.
And dinosaurs is a wonderful segue to the next topic I want to talk about. As someone whose appointments to the hairdresser to tap the grey out have become more frequent, and that's about ageism within communication. So, we talk a lot about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So, but do we, are we seeing kind of more ageism as kind of the acceptable, kind of being more acceptable within this profession? Probably an odd way to phrase the question, but certainly it's garnered quite a lot of debate amongst kind of people that I've been speaking to. So
acceptable, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Very hard to prove on a case-by-case individual basis. But I think anecdotally, from candidates we speak to, nearly everybody I know that is finding it very difficult to find work at the moment is 40, 45 plus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's happening. It's out there. We are, and just to be absolutely clear, kind of when it comes to shortlists from our perspective, we don't care how old you are. That's honestly, it's like could not care.
Mhm.
But people at that age are are really struggling to find new roles at the moment, even even sort of head of and director level roles, which really should be absolutely within their wheelhouse. It's going on.
Mhm.
What do you do about it? I'm struggling.
Yeah, I did have to speak to someone in my network who said that they were looking for a director of internal comms, but they didn't want to pay a director of internal comms money. So they were happy with someone kind of young and upcoming that they could maybe put into the role. That was like absolutely blatant ageism as far as I was concerned. But yeah, I mean, but what to do about it? What to do about it? Yeah, it's a tough one.
I do think there's kind of, we'll always educate clients on salary bands, etc. I'm sure everyone who follows me on LinkedIn has seen my has seen my slightly fiery posts when it comes to salary bands, and yeah, some of the salary bands that are on offer for head of and director level roles on both sides of the pond have been there've been some pretty disgraceful examples. So look, we will always educate kind of clients on that. I think there will always be an element of some companies, given the market, will try it on.
Mm.
I think also for everybody, even if you are finding it difficult and you are kind of reaching a slightly desperate stage for a new role, is kind of know your own worth. And yeah, sure, there might need to be a bit of negotiation, but kind of don't go completely kind of lowering your expectations just because you need a job. Don't let companies take advantage of you.
The adage comes to mind: if you don't want to pay the price of a good hire, wait till you see the price of a bad hire.
I like that. That may become our motto. I also think it depends, how you present yourself, right? There are young people who present old, and old people who present young. And it's, one of my partners, Monica Talon, is an AI expert and works in the Web3 space. And she's, a few years younger than me, but not that many. Sorry, Mon. And, she says she's older than a lot of the people in the space she's in, but she's valuable and relevant, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's, it's also behooves everyone to, keep yourself up to date in what's happening. And that's part of it too, right?
Yeah, and as someone quite rightly puts in the chat, it happened. I've seen it at both ends as well. So you're too young, you don't have enough experience as opposed to it's slightly maybe a little bit discreet when it's a bit too experienced for something. So that's interesting. All right. Yeah, really interesting conversation going in the chat, but I'm going to talk about AI now because it wouldn't be a webinar if we didn't talk about AI, didn't we? So are we seeing the impacts of, are we seeing the impacts of AI on kind of recruitment, on resourcing, on jobs disappearing? So, AI, it's probably come into the modern conversation in the last 18 months to 2 years, but, are we seeing any impacts on comms just yet? Maybe you, Travis.
I'll say only as an enabling tool. I think the original way the question was phrased was the threat of AI, which I frequently see that. And I'm like, it's not a threat. It shouldn't be a threat. It should be a tool. The threat is if you don't understand it and understand how to leverage it. I think that's the threat. But that itself, I don't think is a threat on its own.
Right.
I saw an article, IBM had was changing a lot, laying off a lot of their marketing and communications folks. And there was a link to something they said. I tried to find this for this conversation, and I'm sure I could have gone deeper, but it said, they laid off marketing and communications people, and they talked about it focusing more on AI. And I feel like some people put that together, and maybe it is together, maybe that is, cause and effect, but I'm not sure. So I think, I agree with you, Travis. It's a tool. That's what I'm saying. You have to know how to use the tool. And that, for now, it's, you're not going to not get hired because you can't write or whatever, but you really need to understand how AI works and how it can help you and benefit, et cetera, et cetera. I think there's a lot there, and it's changing every day. Like, it's so hard. I subscribe to so many newsletters, and they're always like, this new AI and this new AI, and this one will help you with this presentation, and this one will help you with this speech, and this one can do the clips. And it's like, it's mind blowing.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. I think there's probably there's two strands of answers to this. One is, yeah, kind of from a comms professional and career point of view, yeah, look, I don't see it as that much of a threat. I think it will be an enabler, as Travis said. It's great at processing large amounts of data really quickly. Quite often for me, if I'm writing something, I'll get a bit of writer's block. I fully admit, kind of ChatGPT does a quite nice first draft. So you can use it for things like that, kind of, which is fine. I do think you need to upskill yourself if you're not completely familiar with it. But having said that, we've actually just got a brief on at the moment in financial services where the client wants to do a writing task. They will be putting it through an AI checker, which is interesting. So, that ability to be able to write and story tell is still there. And also, I think as more companies and more people do try to exploit AI for things like content writing and campaigns, everything is going to start reading samey.
Mhm.
If you can actually write something original, how much is that going to stand out? It will stand out like a sore thumb. It'll be really good for you. So I think, yeah, don't lose your natural ability. And then just quickly, just on AI from a recruitment perspective, yes, it is being used, particularly by some larger organizations. So HMRC here in the UK, which I think in the US, that would be the IRS, the tax authorities. Am I right on that? So HMRC, for their more junior roles, have started doing the recruitment process entirely via AI. And the first time an applicant actually meets a human is when they arrive at the office for their induction. That to me is nuts. Crazy.
Totally.
I did love what you said earlier, Jane, when you pointed out, hey, writing is one of the key 3 areas that we take a look at because it is a skill that is dissipating across the function quickly. And it's to the point where I've had to give guidelines to folks saying, do not give me something that sounds like it was written by AI. All of that content that is evergreen that people refer to, oh, we'll build up a bulk of content and we'll leverage it when we need it. Evergreen equals never seen because it is so bland, it is so vanilla, nobody pays attention to it. And so you're exactly right, Max. It can be something that makes you stand out.
Yeah. And I also think that it's important, with videos, et cetera, to sort of note it when it's made of it, if you're going to be ethical about it, note this was made with AI or however, right? So that people know. I just think that gives you so much credibility if you're willing to say X, Y, Z was created with AI.
I mean,
Yeah.
if something said made with AI for me on that, I just wouldn't read it. I'd just press delete straight away.
No, I'm thinking videos and things,
Yeah. All right. Yeah.
things like that. I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that, I've told my kids for college, I told them if you're stuck, exactly what you said, Max, use AI for your first draft, but then you go in and change it and you make it your own. It's a thought starter. It's not the thought ender.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with what the chat is moving so quickly, but for me, there is so much more to AI than ChatGPT, Claude, or Bard. I use it for focus groups. I use it to extract data from very long reports that I haven't got the time to read. And, there's a question here in the chat about learning and training of comms professionals. 2 years ago, I set myself, an hour a day, and I still couldn't keep up with everything that was going on. But sorry, the person that asked the question is anonymous. But what I would say is I think the UK government is giving grants to people to help learn AI. And I know that some of the professional bodies, IABC, PRCA, CIPR, are doing, there's a lot of acronyms there, sorry. They're doing a lot to kind of help upskill the profession. And I would just encourage you to lean on those people if you don't have the budget internally to do this, because, the people I think that will get on will be the people that can use AI for tasks rather than a kind of ignoring it a little bit.
Right.
So,
I did a Coursera. I don't know if you're familiar with Coursera in the UK, but I did a Coursera course through Wharton. That was multi-part on, it was data analysis. It was nothing. It was very, very different for me. And what I got out of it was it's all about the data. Basically, the end is it's all about the data. I think Khan Academy is starting to do things on AI and other things. So there are a lot of resources out there. I agree with you, Anne-Marie. There's a lot out there, and it's worth taking your time.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask another question, and I know it caused quite a lot of debate on your feed, Max. I was busy, so I couldn't join in the chat because I didn't have an hour to spare. But and this is about transferable skills in comms and organizations insisting that, new hires have, exactly the attributes that, maybe the previous incumbent had. So, if I came from financial services, must have financial services, must have, FMCG, etc. So, A, are you seeing that? And B, well, kind of just what do you think about that sort of trend, if it is a trend?
Yeah, sure. So I think, trend-wise, particularly at the moment, I think there is a very clear differentiator here between what is the truth versus what is reality. So, the absolute truth is that a really good comms person can and is very capable of moving cross-sector and picking up a new sector or industry really quickly. That is not up for debate. It's not under question from me or by clients or by hiring managers. The reality is that where we are, particularly at the moment, where it is still a very candidate-heavy market, most clients have the pick of the candidates they want to choose. Also, given where we are from a macroeconomic point of view, everyone is playing a bit of a straight bat and it's quite defensive. They want plug and play as much as possible. So what we are seeing is, yes, whether it's right or wrong, the industry and sector experience is often what is the winner if you have two equally, skilled and great candidates. It's the one with the sector and industry experience who is getting the job at the moment.
Max, do you find that depends on the hiring manager? In other words, if the hiring manager has spent 25 years in the same industry versus moved around?
It's not even necessarily the hiring manager. It could be, when they go to meet someone higher up, or they meet the CEO or someone else on Exco. There is still very much a bit of caution at play in many companies. It's not just in comms or in recruitment, but just across the board, right? So a lot of people are being relatively defensive with it. And that's what's driving that. And that's where that is coming from, I think.
Interesting. Any thoughts on that, Travis? Are you requiring sector experience for your roles?
I have lots of thoughts on that.
Good. Please share.
I do think that the natural instinct for most organizations is to look for cookie cutter candidates who are exactly what they've had before, minus maybe, a few things here or there on, we'd like to tweak this up and tweak that down. But they're looking for what they've had before. Now, occasionally, I think you'll get a client who says, okay, we want to shake it up a little bit. And so they're disappointed when they get served those cookie cutter candidates. And they're like, hey, I thought you'd give me somebody who had knocked it out of the park in 4 very different industries, because if they've knocked it out of the park in 4 industries, they're going to knock it out of the park in mine. But I think that's rare. I think those are your really good HR people, your really good senior leaders who are looking for pure raw talent, versus somebody who's got the experience that is prescriptive for the job description that they have. So no, I like to look for raw talent. I like to look for attitude and energy. If they've got that experience, that's great. The problem with finding those candidates is they're sometimes not as well known. I've talked to recruiters who said, who's like, how did such and such get that job? It's like, well, because they've done that industry for 20 years and they're known in that industry. So if you're someone who switches industries, it can be hard to elevate your profile to get considered for some of those jobs.
Yes, I guess that's one of the places that LinkedIn and your personal branding can help you in terms of, really talking about the stuff you do, because it's not, I don't always think it's people that like and comment. It may actually be those lurkers that are thinking, actually, I'm hiring for someone like that. I'll take them on.
Right.
I'm going to come to a question in the chat now, which has been kind of on my kind of right eye for a little while, which I think is an interesting one. Do you see a trend that global companies have no central IC team with a global IC strategy and narrative, but communicators sit within the functions?
So more of a decentralized structure is what you're saying.
Yeah, I think that's what the question's asking. Is that more of a trend?
I'm just saying one thing. What I've seen is companies centralized, decentralized, centralized, decentralized, centralized, decentralized. That's what I've seen. So I'm not sure where we are. where this pendulum's swinging right now, but that's what I see: centralized, decentralized.
Should it be in HR? Should it be in marketing? I've reported to finance. It kind of doesn't, I think we just have to, doesn't really matter. We just have to kind of plow on.
I think the most important thing for any comms leader, particularly or most senior person, even if their direct line report is not the CEO, but having that access to the CEO, you absolutely have to have it, and the CEO should demand it, and it should be there. I think if you're a senior comms person and you're interviewing for a role, and whether it's on the screening call or at first interview, and you start asking about access to the CEO, if they start getting a bit funny about it or don't give you a straight answer, I think that's a big red flag.
Can I tell just a funny story from when I started? So I started at Hill and Knowlton for a couple of years, and then I was interviewed and then I was hired at Liz Claiborne. And I was the first. There was Liz Claiborne was in the early '90s, and I was the first agency hire they had, and the head of the department, who's still a good friend of mine. The way they arranged it was whoever answered the phone did the interview. So if Fortune called and they wanted to do an interview with the chairman of the company, that's how it was. He was the CEO, and I answered the phone. I did the interview with the chairman of the company, and it was a really interesting. I mean, it sounds terrifying, but it was a really good way to learn and get visibility inside the organization. Again, because it was homegrown at that point, it was grown up at that point. It wasn't like someone came in and organized the function, and I will say that I had a lot of access to the C-suite and I had a lot of access to the chairman, such so that, he died when he was one of the founders. He died a few years ago, and I was still involved in something with him many years later. It's just really interesting way to do it. I mean, I don't know that anyone would ever have the guts to do it now. I'm not sure I would ever have the guts to do it now, but it was so good. Great way to get in there.
Absolutely. We'll just get your way to the CEO. I did see another question actually that I wanted. Oh, and actually, I think it was a bit of an extension from that CEO one, which is about, does it matter if they report to this CCO or the CMO? I don't know whether anyone's got any additional thoughts on that.
CCO would obviously be preferred, but reality is that sometimes it's CCO, sometimes it's CMO. I think just on that CMO relationship, I think comms people need to be, you should see your marketing colleagues as very much an ally and as an extension of your own team rather than a competitor. And I think kind of we always go back to relationship building, and I think Jane, was it you who said at the very start around kind of being able to provide that sort of C-suite comms counsel is really important now. It's exactly the same if you're reporting into a CMO. You really need to be able to provide that counsel. And sure, look, you're not always going to be able to win every argument or every fight, but kind of pick your battles and and just make sure you get a really good relationship there.
Fantastic. Almost last one from me, well, let me just ask it and you can give me your point of view. So on the one hand, I have people saying there are no jobs. And then on the other hand, I have hiring managers saying there's no talent. So how can both things be true? Well, are both things true? And if so, how can they both be true at the same time? There's so much talent. Yes, Keith. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. There are jobs. There are more jobs than there were this time last year. The element of whether some of those jobs are real or not, I am definitely with people that I think there are roles advertised by well-known brands across all different industries that the role just seems to be left up on LinkedIn for months on end. And were they actually really that interested or that bothered to hire that person? I don't know. But yeah, no, look, kind of there are definitely more jobs out there. I think, we've seen it from an agency point of view. There is more stuff coming out to agency now as well. Though there was, and it's still a trend to an extent, where a lot of companies are still just working an advert up on LinkedIn, waiting for 200-300 people to apply, and then trying to filter through all of those, which I think is not having good results, both for the company and for candidates. I think everybody's just a bit cheesed off with it. I think it kind of has sort of reached breaking point. And also it's not, and you've also got to remember, as frustrating it is for a candidate, there is going to be an internal recruiter at that organization who has got to try and go through 200 or 300, resumes or CVs. It's just not realistic or possible for them to be able to do that. So yeah, that's my comment on that. And then your hiring managers not being able to find what they want. I think there's definitely a trend of those unicorn candidates. Everybody's looking for a unicorn, like a jack of all trades, a Swiss Army knife.
In my experience, I've got two positions open right now. And one is, and our titles are conservative. We got one who's a director of corporate comms, and then I've got a manager level that is that Swiss Army knife that I mentioned that I'd been looking for. And I got many more applications for the director role for people who really, in many cases, are much more suited for the manager role, which is quite well compensated for their experience level. And they would not even consider, when reapproached by our people and culture team, would not even consider, taking the manager level role. So I think there's some play there too.
And just for clarification, are these people who are currently at manager level who you think would just be a good fit, and they only want to go for the director level, or?
Yes. And in some cases, I mean, you know how funny titles are. So, I mean, in some cases, it's like, yeah, this requires a certain level of experience that you currently have a director title. It's a manager, but, you're going to be making a lot more money.
Got it.
Brilliant. I'm going to wrap my final question and try and kind of grab some of the comments in the chat, which is around, like, is the recruitment process like just dysfunctional? So we've got AI, we've got odd things going on, we've got, very experienced, talented people that have been on the bench for some times. Like, is it dysfunctional? And are there any kind of words of hope that we can offer that it will be okay? That it'll be, if you're hunting for a role, that it will be okay. Thank you, Claire. It's functional.
Yes, it's pretty dysfunctional at the moment. I think, you've got a perfect storm, right? Lots of really good candidates looking, all competing for a growing number, but still not a normal number of roles. Plus, you've also got a lot of companies that laid off a lot of their internal talent acquisition teams. So they have less internal recruiters looking after more vacancies. And you've got to remember, most companies of most sizes, they won't have a dedicated comms and marketing recruiter looking after comms and marketing. It will be someone looking after corporate functions. So they'll be recruiting comms, HR, they'll, kind of IT, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, when they've got too many vacancies to manage, they, they can't screen everybody. They also, because they might only have, a couple of comms vacancies a year to recruit, very understandably, they don't really understand the job or the function. Why would they? So yeah, you just have this perfect storm of just lots of things that aren't helpful to the recruitment process all coming together at the same time. To offer a beacon of hope, what can people do about it? Start giving comm search and selection your roles, and we'll sort it out for you.
There's always fractional.
We will invoice you for £5,000 after this call.
Yeah, exactly.
The one thing about, again, we were talking earlier about our kids, but I think it's true for everyone. All of these applications that happen online, you send in your app, you fill out your thing, you send in whatever it is, no matter how senior the role, not C-suite, but see more senior roles, and then it does go into this abyss, and you don't hear back. There's just, we always talk about ghosting and people ghosting each other, but there's a lot of ghosting that happens in the process of applying for a job. And I keep telling my kids, I was like, well, just call, pick up the phone and make a phone call. But depending on the company, they're like, we only go through our portal. So it's a really tough, that is tough. You get nothing back. And there's no human, you don't even know there's no one you can reach out to by design. So I just think that's really hard.
Yeah.
Sorry,
that's a whole other hour, isn't it? The ghosting is a whole other hour of conversation, isn't it?
Yeah. I do think there's definitely something companies and recruiters can do. For example, kind of when you post a job advert on LinkedIn, as a job poster, you have the ability to be able to put your profile against the advert, which we do. a lot of companies, when they, kind of when they're advertising directly, don't put the name and the contact details of the recruiter either on their adverts or against the profile. They really should do that. It's not difficult. It's literally, it's one tick of a checkbox on LinkedIn. Takes 1 second. I think that would help. So there's at least a face and a name that people can follow up with.
Brilliant. Thank you. Mike, I'm going to hand back to you if that's okay. I mean, this has been an absolutely fascinating discussion, hasn't it? So thank you very much. I'm going to hand back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne-Marie. This has truly been a rollicking discussion. It's been a debate at times, but it's certainly been a rollicking discussion. It's been by far the most animated chat section that we've had in the series that we've had so far. Want to thank everybody who submitted a question, a comment. Obviously, we couldn't get to them all because we only have a 1 hour slot here. Want to thank the participants for your candid and enthusiastic participation. Travis making his second We Lead Comms debate. Jane and Max, thank you very much for your comments, for your participation. Fantastic turnout. By the way, if anybody's got questions, this will be available on demand. So if you want to share this with people, feel free to give them the registration link and it's possible to reach. Just want to mention the next, first I actually want to mention our sponsor, the Center for Strategic Communication Excellence, which has been supporting us throughout this series. But also want to mention the next debate, which will take place in early August. And that next debate will be on the subject of internal communication. Is there a future? So I want to thank you very much for your participation. And if you've got any questions for me, I'm very reachable on LinkedIn. And if you're not following We Lead Comms, follow We Lead Comms. Thank you very much for your participation today.
Cheers, Mike. Thank you very much for having us. And thank you everyone for your comments as well.
Yes, it was fun. Thank you guys. Travis, let's have lunch. I'm not that far from you.
Sounds great.